Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth webinar, the third webinar, I'm sorry. So welcome back to those who was with us last week. And for those who are just joining us, welcome to the series of Embracing Change. We have a very special guest today, all the way from Los Angeles, a dear friend, an incredible human being, beautiful soul, and an amazing psychotherapist. She's been taking care of me and my family as we have experienced what we have, and is working with a number of our families as well in the Qineticare space. Today she will be sharing with us things that are occurring for the families that she's taking care of as we all cocoon or in lockdown, as whatever word we use, and a lot of stuff is coming up. We have the opportunity to spend with our loved ones, to connect, and to truly be in that heart space, but at the same time, challenges, the things that were not surfacing are now above board. The cracks are turning into craters, but at the same time, she will share with us the opportunity that exists. So as she shares, please comment in the chat box. Please send over the questions that you feel you'd like to address. Remember, this is about you. This is not about us. We're here to serve, and we'll do our best. So please welcome Kathleen. Honor, privilege. Thank you for giving us the generosity of your time. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone from Los Angeles, and Feisal, thank you for the opportunity. Indeed, you've been a wonderful, good friend. I remember our time here in Los Angeles in a different world last September. So I'm very happy to be here and honored to be with you all today on this very, very important topic. And as Feisal pointed out, you know, these are tremendously different times, and they give us the opportunity to be with our loved ones in a way perhaps we haven't been for a long time. However, there are challenges with that, and with the families I'm working with all around the globe, I'm starting to see a little bit of fraying around the edges, and I think principally because we're on lockdown. All of the distractions and the pleasures that we have in the outside world have diminished and been compromised. And there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around what's the world going to be like when this is over? What are we going to have left? So there's that outside influence outside of our homes about what's actually going to happen, how it's affecting our family businesses, and then the cocooning inside. How are we affecting each other? And part of what I'm seeing is, you know, problems that existed before the lockdown, right? Such as marital tension, difficulties between siblings, unresolved issues in succession and between the generations, they are starting to become more pronounced, particularly between couples. And I think this is something that we need to address. And I'd like to say that, you know, there's some things we can do about that. And one of them is to be very careful about how we communicate with each other. Volatility in terms of what we say, because things are more tense. We can create arguments, sometimes in front of the children, resulting in a situation that really isn't good. So I think we want to, first of all, be careful about the discussions we're having with our families and try to focus on the reasons we're a family to begin with. The love, the cooperation, the tolerance, the things that brought us together in the first place and try to focus on them. In the situations where problems are not being dealt with or unable to be dealt with, for example, in addiction, this is a problem that we're starting to see. The people who have had addiction problems are maybe using the substances more because of fear and frustration. Now, this is very difficult because there are treatment centers still open, but how to organize that care can still be done, but it's still difficult. So, I'd like to hear, from you on that. And the other thing is how to deal with fear and uncertainty. So, whatever your thoughts might be, I'm here to help you with that. Another theme that I think hasn't been addressed is the grief and loss. One is the loss that we're experiencing in our relationship with the world. The other loss is some clients have already been in the hospital with COVID, and their family members are not able to be with them. They're not able to get on a plane, whereas before the entire family would go and be able to be there, we're not able to do that right now. So this creates more fear, more grief, and uncertainty. So there's a tremendous amount of loss going on. Also, in the sense of people dying from regular causes. I'm working with a family whose the wife died just as this was happening. They have not been able to have a funeral. The family is in different parts of the world. This is adding extra stress to the grief that they're already experiencing because we're not able to have the rituals and the closure that we honor in our cultures and help us get through these things. Right. So I'm going to stop for a minute. Those are some of the things I've wanted to put out there, and I wanted to see if you have any experiences you would like to share. Faisal?
Yeah, I'll share while we wait for people to share about what the losses that they're experiencing, right? And what we're seeing is obviously the biggest fear is what will the world be like when we re-enter into, I had a call just now with the CEO of one of the biggest brands in the world, and obviously social unrest is a big one, right? People are concerned that security, how will the security level be? But another thing that was very positive that he said was that, even being a big brand of luxury, they're looking at humanizing and bringing the human element and care into the service and the product. So there's a positive side. A lot of innovation and creativity is being expressed.
Right, and that is key because look, humanity, this is not, how do they say, this is not our first rodeo. Humanity has been through terrible, terrible things all throughout history, and we've survived. We can do this again, but this is different in the sense that we know we're fighting a virus. We don't know the extent of it. It is a war in some sense, with a terrible enemy that we're trying to find a cure for. The tendency of humanity is to get very fearful. We get into what's called the limbic system, which is a fear-based system. We disconnect from the executive part of our brain and the part beyond that, which is our spirituality, and we act and make choices from that limbic system. And so to your first point, yes, social unrest could happen if people don't have jobs, depending on how long this goes, and people start operating from that place of fear and scarcity. You will begin to see that. My hope is that we can help ourselves and help others by staying focused on our executive functioning brain, the ability to strategize, innovate, create. And then thirdly, the spiritual part of our brain that comes together as humanity and wants to help each other. Now, this can happen on the micro sense in the family. So what you're going to see outside, you're going to see a mirror in the family itself. And hopefully we can use higher level strategies to cope with the person who's getting on our nerves, with perhaps our spouse that we did have issues, to that son or daughter who's maybe using some substances they shouldn't be, or engaging in behaviors they shouldn't be. So to recognize the fearful place and move beyond that, step into the strategic part of the brain that says, okay, how can I solve this problem? And it may be that while we're on lockdown, we can't bring in outside forces that may help, other than perhaps a treatment center for addiction. So we have to think about how we're going to deal with this high level of stress with people in our own families. And maybe that means stepping back and saying, you know what? We're all human here. I see the problems. I can't fix them right now, but I can resolve to try to do better, to recognize our common humanity, reinforce the values that we started out with, because it really is about values. What's important now and what isn't? You know, those arguments, if you think about arguments, they're basically a projection of noise, of internal noise, of something that's bothering you. So if you stop and think, do you really need to tune into that station? Do you need to play that song right now? Is there another way of looking at this? Can you hold back and say, you know what? It's not necessary to do that. Let me bring it up to a higher, to the music of the spheres, or something a little bit higher than the same old, shall we say, carping on something. And I think in terms of communication, that is so helpful with families. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we've got a number of questions coming in. So basically,
Okay.
a single parent who's obviously concerned that if something were to happen to them, you know, then the children would be on their own, and that's a fear. So how do you deal, or what are your words for dealing with that? I mean, you've experienced loss the other way around, which I didn't share, and you've written an incredible book on that. But this is the human being. I mean, you know, in my case, when I had the cancer, I still had, you know, the mother was there, and if something were to happen, she would have taken over. But in this case, it would have to be brothers, sisters, or, you know, others. So any words that you can share with?
I'm reading it on the chat, and first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job with your boys and taking care of them. I do think that this time inside, this time where we're locked down, will bring out our worst fears. And the fear is, what if something happens to me? Who's going to take care of my family? And that's a real and legitimate fear. However, can we live in that fear? Can we come from that place of fear? We can, but it's not going to do us or our children any good. So somehow we have to take that breath. We have to take our mind out of that limbic state, out of that fearful state, and say, you know what? What's going to be is going to be, and I will have the strength to handle it. It'll be difficult, I'm not saying that, but you will have the strength to deal with it should it happen, and it's not happening now. Remember that. Part of the limbic system was created early in mankind because you had to deal with the real fear. The tiger was coming out, you had to do something or you were dead. In modern day times, the objectified fear is further away, but we feel it as though it's imminent, and it's not. It's a possibility, but it's not really what's happening now. So the first thing we need to do is to get back into our higher mind and say, you know what, it's not happening now. God forbid if it does, I will deal with it then. So it's really moving that fear, and I know, and we know what the fears are, and we're all scared. I mean, you can't be human without having some fear about this. So I hope that helps a little bit. And one of the things you can do is take that breath, look at the fear. How close is it? Is it happening now? Are you okay now? And then give thanks for what you do have now. And realize too, this is part of the grief you're already experiencing. Okay?
Then you've got people who are actually enjoying this time of disconnection, and obviously not looking forward to going back to the networking and the business and social life that was. So this is the opposite where the cocooning is really suiting them, and not. And then again, you know, I mean, as a young adult who hasn't had the experiences of loss, has never experienced it, doesn't even know what it tastes like, doesn't know what it feels like, right? I mean, how do they even imagine it when they don't even know, have no experience? Anyway.
All right, I'm reading the chat. Hi, Jess. I think this is an interesting thing, because I find myself also enjoying it. I'm getting a little bored, I have to say, but I'm enjoying not having all of those pressures that normally, in the normal business sense, we're all surrounded by all the time, socially, networking, just the daily things. And I also wonder, gosh, when I go out now and take my walk around Beverly Hills, I'm not sure how I'm going to engage. And I think this is probably a question all of us might have, because we don't know what the world's going to look like. But my guess is we will adapt, and maybe as a result of this, we will preserve more of our time for the downtime, because we realize that we actually need and like that. So there's some lessons to be learned here too. How busy are we in the world? Do we need to be that busy? Do we give enough time to our home life? So these are positive questions I think that we can begin to answer, or at least think about, and get ready for that day, because I'm sure they're going to let us out at some point. One would hope. Right? Okay, so reading the questions. I'm a young adult without such experience. You were saying that losing faith in their future, not accepting. This is an important one also, because I think as young people, I'm trying to remember, but we have a certain optimism in the world that's built in. And that's what youth is about, that we have predictability, that we have parents who care for us, we have social structures, we have all the things that propel us into the world that we enjoy. Is that going to be true now? And I don't know the answer to that question, other than to say things will change. They're bound to change. They're already changed. But we will still have a world, and you will be important in that world. And you will be able to contribute to that world. And I think the task now is to acknowledge the fear and the fear of loss of that predictable world you did have, and realize that this is your time. This is your world. You're going to move into it, and you're going to bring your gifts. And those gifts will be appreciated, needed, and used. So try to think about it in that sense, that while there might not be much comfort in terms of what's happening with the fear, but you could comfort yourself in knowing that you will help to reconstruct this world, right? Okay. Reading from Basil. Hi, Basil. As someone who lost a sibling, yes, my concern is facing additional loss. Again, this is the grief and loss, and this to me is about control. Particularly when we lose someone suddenly, as I have and as many of you have, we recognize the loss of control in our world. And I think that aside from the obvious sadness and grief, the loss of control is very difficult for all of us. So that leads us to think, well, what if something else happens? How am I going to be able to handle that? What if it happened once, it can happen again? And as I said earlier, this is the truth. Things do happen, but we must trust that we will be able to deal with it, that the inner resources that we have an opportunity to cultivate now will see us through. And once again, it hasn't happened. It happened in the past. But getting back to the moment, what's happening now? Is it okay now? What are the things you have to deal with now? Rather than thinking about things that you just don't know. And those of us who have experienced these traumatic, it's the last thing you would have thought about, which to me is a key, because I actually don't know what's going to happen, just like I didn't know when the last thing happened. So I might as well live in a more optimistic state, because I don't know what's going to happen. So I can live either in a fearful state about what's going to happen, or I can say, you know what, right now it's okay. I might not feel that great, but that thing I'm afraid of hasn't happened right at this moment. And I think that's the control, and it's control over the mind, right? But this coronavirus, because it's so unsettling, I think it allows fear to come in. It allows all the specters of the past, the present, and the future to come towards us. And we begin to feel unsettled because maybe those things are going to come in. It's even, am I susceptible to this virus? We don't even know. If we walk out into the street and go shopping in a grocery store, does that food have coronavirus on it? You know, this is unprecedented in the level of fear that we're facing every day. So the only thing I feel that we can do is go into our inner self and strengthen our resilience and our resolve not to live in fear, to engage in our higher mind where we can strategically plan and think of things. That's where the courage is. That's where the strength is.
So there's a recurring theme coming where some people are away from their loved ones and feeling guilty, whether it's been because of a decision that was made last minute or just circumstance, and they're feeling guilty that they're not there. And obviously, again, if God forbid something were to happen, I mean, that we've addressed, but just that guilt, right? I mean, it is what it is. We all know it will pass. But again, how, you know, what tools or what things do you recommend for them to process that guilt?
Right. I think it's a very hard thing. And this is one of the big restrictions. And I've heard this from a lot of different families, you know, kids who were at school who didn't make it out in time, or still maybe waiting for flights, or have just decided to shelter in place, which means they're distant from their family. And this is a really scary thing for all of us, because humanity started small tribes. We stayed with the tribe. We faced whatever was happening together. So now we can't do that physically, but we can still do it mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. We can do it through video, through contacts with the people we love, and make that as loving as it possibly can be, so that you can marshal all your resources, all the people you know, and stay in contact with them. It's not the same, but think about it. If we didn't have this technology, we really would be alone. So at least we have the means to reach out and connect with each other on many different platforms. Once again, this is where trust comes in. We are where we are because that's how we ended up. That's what happened at this moment in time, and there's nothing to be done about it. But we can look forward to a time when the sanctions, the things will be lifted, the lockdowns will finally let us out. Hopefully we will be able to get where we need to be. In the meantime, we have to stay strong. Again, getting out of the limbic function, which says, I'm afraid. It's really saying, I'm not going to make it. But the truth is, you will. And you will be with your family again in whatever form that takes. But today, to have the inner strength and the inner belief that you can do this, because you have to. This is the time to step into yourself, into your true self, and be stronger than you've ever been, and develop those human qualities of courage and faith and hope, optimism.
What are some of the, maybe you want to share some of the rituals that and habits that you've created on a day-to-day basis in order to be able to build the resilience? I mean, I didn't share, I mean, just for everyone to know, I mean, Kathleen lost her husband of a heart attack, and then lost her son, who was abducted by crackheads and found in the woods while at university. So you're speaking to someone who's been through beyond anything I could ever imagine. And so what are the things that you do on a day-to-day basis or on a regular basis in terms of habits that have really helped you through some of these absolutely unimaginable experiences of pain?
Well, you know, it's been 20 years since Aaron was murdered at college, and it was, as you can imagine, an incredibly difficult thing. I had always had a strong faith. I always prayed and meditated, and I have to say that faith was challenged at that time, and I came through that, and I understood I really believe what I believe, and I do believe in the goodness of the world, despite the fact that as humans we have choices to do both good and evil. I meditate every morning, and I try to think of things I'm grateful for. Meditation is one of those processes that I rely on to help me out of the limbic system, which is where we live also when we have PTSD through something shocking and sudden, and takes us to our higher mind, which can then be much more objective about what has happened and what's going to happen. And that is the main tool that I use and have used for years and years. I never go a day without a morning meditation to elevate the level of perspective and not stay in the system of fear. That doesn't mean that I didn't have years of really traumatic grief, but I came out of that over time and realized that life is good. I still have a relationship with my son. I would prefer it in the physical. That's not available to me. But this is a time also, I believe, for all of us to look at our belief systems. What is it you actually believe? In the world after, is there one for yourself? Your childhood faith, how well is that serving you? Maybe it's time to take another look. Take it out, brush it off, make it elevated, make it work for you. Because that's the strong backbone. Belief in the goodness, even though there's a lot of bad things. That ultimately humanity survives, and the goodness is what we bring to that, or at least the desire to be good. But fear is the specter everywhere. It destroys everything. So we have a choice to live in fear or live in our own goodness, our own optimism. That things work out, they always do. Maybe not the way you want them to, but they will work out. So as long as you take a breath, you have a choice in the next breath how you're going to respond. And that, by the way, and I wrote about this in my book, is life is full of all sorts of things, some of which are very unpleasant, like what we're going through now. The human freedom that we have, the one that can never be taken away, is how we respond to what life gives us. That determines who we are. We have the choice to either respond in the worst ways possible, or somehow find it in ourselves to become full human beings that love, that laugh, that cry, that believe. And this is a challenge for us. And maybe if you come away with nothing else than the resolve to be the best you can be, and realize this is just a thing out there. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. In the meantime, you can raise your level of consciousness to face this and actually find things in yourself you didn't know you had.
Thank you, Kathleen. So we have a gentleman who whose the kids are in Europe, and they just lost their grandmother, who's in the United States, and obviously haven't been able to attend a funeral and have closure. And obviously the father is speaking to the children on a regular basis, but obviously there are others, I'm sure, in this position, hopefully not too many. But what would be your advice and thoughts to this father to bring, the love and care and help the children with the grief, with the loss of their grandmother?
Right. And this is a situation where the virus really did strike someone close. And, that's the reality of it. And the family is not together physically. And this is where, our rituals of funerals are so important, and we can't have them, right? I think what could happen is on a platform like Zoom. I'm sure, you're talking to your daughters every day, but is there some way that the four of you can get together and create a ritual for yourselves, a saying goodbye, an honoring of this wonderful grandmother, someone whom you love and care for, who, depending on what you believe, is still with you? Is there some way of creating something to bring the family together? You can write something, you could create a ritual, You can say certain things that you want to say. You could write a letter and read it to each other. There are ways we can do this. Again, it's not the same, but we have to work with what we can do, right? So I hope that's helpful. I'm trying to read the question. So again, if you want to feel some closure, I would recommend creating a ritual together and doing it online.
Please keep sharing. Okay, we just got another mini message. Again, everybody, again, it's enjoying the current moment and the struggles, and obviously not knowing what's going to come next. These are all the common themes. What will be normal life? Obviously, it will never be the same, right? So here it's coming in communication within the family. I think let's shift gears.
Right.
What tools or practices can you share?
Address that point about the carrot, that what this person said. It is very well put. It is a transformational moment, whether you're enjoying it or not. So I would look at how this can transform you in a better way. What qualities of strength and courage and hope and faith and optimism, what internally can you work with to make sure you're prepared for whatever happens? Then it doesn't matter what happens. You can financially and try to get all that sorted out, but the internal reality is who you are. So trying to cultivate those qualities I mentioned so that this experience can transform you for the better. And I like that word, because that word means that whatever happens, there's an element of transformation in it. Our job is to rise to that occasion and transform ourselves in the most positive way possible, right? So I hope that helps. Let me...
Yeah, so basically asking about communication with the family. What tools or practices can you share that a family could use to get through this period?
Right, this is a big one, because again, the tension of being confined can bring out the best and also the worst in us. In terms of communication, I think it's very important to sort of monitor what you're saying and realize that some of the things you might say because of these pressures could be hurtful, could be damaging. It may be better at this point to be honest about what you feel, but also be kind about it. To realize the best values you could have now are tolerance and non-judgment. We are who we are. There may be things you don't like. You can express them in a kinder way. You could try to look for solutions or strategic solutions to deal with what you're seeing. But communication, pressured communication never works. So we have to kind of check ourselves to see where we're coming from. Is the thing I'm going to say going to be hurtful or useful? Let me think about the message I'm giving first, and then decide how I'm going to deliver it. If certain hard things need to be said, you can still be kind about it. Sometimes I think during this time, if you can table some things, some really sticky situations, that might be better. But if you can't, if things need to be said, I think the communication of a neutral platform, saying, I have something to tell you, I need you to listen, I'm going to try to be as kind and tolerant as I can. Sort of having that checklist in your head, right? Okay. And this one, my friends are going through a tough time for all the reasons. However, they choose not to ask for help. Well, you know, this is interesting because it's talking about when people rely on a person for all their worries and fears, right? So they're asking support from this person who also has his own worries. I think this is a tendency of people. If you're a strong person, people are going to look to you for leadership and support, right? Because they may have in the past. You may have your own worries and your own fears. I think this is a boundary issue. And you might say to the person, look, I'd like to help you, but have you thought about X, Y, Z? Maybe you should talk to your sister, your brother, your uncle. I'm not in a position right now to help you with that. Or have conversations, give what you can, but also recognize that you're having your own worries. And it may be helpful to actually say that. Look, I'd like to help you, but right now I'm not feeling that great. Can we work this out together? So it's really a boundary issue, which gets tougher, by the way, when you're all living together, because people tend to gravitate to who they think they can get leadership from. And boundaries and self-care is very important. You can't give what you don't have. Sometimes you need to step away, recharge, and then be able to go back in, right?
So the children have been overseas for some time. Now they're back home with us. How to help them to still feel independent, which they have tried over the years to become?
They can still be independent, although some of their buttons may be being pushed with being home with dad and mom, right? So that they walk into the house and maybe they start acting like children again, right? So again, this is up to the parents to decide where the boundaries are and to help the kids, you know, and reassure them that this is a really difficult time. I'm glad you're here. We're going to get through this together and you will be stronger and go out and be able to have your own life. So again, it's sort of, you know, the parental role of allowing children to have their fear and recognizing it as legitimate, but walking them through it, right? Because they're afraid of, I think most people are afraid of what the world is going to be like, especially the young people, because it was dependable to them before and it's not now. So I think also that independence will help if you let them rediscover their qualities, their strengths, and have those conversations, by the way, and this is for everyone, about how the family has survived many, many things. There's been generations before that have experienced very difficult challenges. And this is how we got through this. And these are the values we embodied. So the fears are okay, and they lead us to our values and reestablishing them. So maybe even talk about the heroes in the families. Every family has them. This may also be a good time to talk about legacy, succession, the generations that went before. We endured other things. We're going to get through this. Right? Okay.
I have a question. In terms of, you know, those of us who obviously are concerned about what business will be like and what will happen to a lot of the people that we support through our businesses, and obviously that concern or that fear is obviously being felt by the rest of the family. How do you, you know, I mean, obviously on one hand you can share, but there's a limit to what you share. So how do you express yourself that on one hand we may need to move to frugality is one side, but on the other hand, not to have everybody in the household become fearful, right? Concern is one thing, fear is another.
Exactly. And I think this is a question a lot of families are asking, because look, the heart of a family business is taking care not only of your family, but the extended family of the business, the employees, the managers, everything. And this is being severely impacted at the moment. So many of the principles of the family are facing this fear, and don't they don't want to share it in full with the family because they're trying to protect the family. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on the family business owners. In terms of the children, you are still going to help them. You're going to reassure them that everything will be fine one way or another. There may have to be some changes made, but as the leader, you will guide them and you will help them. So it's sort of that, when you're making a journey, the leader doesn't know exactly the way or where they're going, but the leader takes charge in guiding the tribe to where they need to go. The leader may be full of doubt and fear, but he or she guides the tribe where they need to go. And it's that resoluteness that will get the family there, with input, by the way, from the rest of the family. So this is an opportunity for people to step up and learn how they can contribute. So maybe family members who didn't think they had much to contribute because everything was fine can now cultivate their gifts to bring to the family as leaders themselves. And this is very important, because even, God forbid, if the business fails, which if we look at generational businesses that have been going over many generations, there have been losses and gains. There have been world wars. People have gotten through these things. Even if they lose, they rebuild. It's the heart of the family to be led and for everyone to contribute and step up, regardless of the fear. So what Eleanor Roosevelt said, we don't act because we don't have fear. We do the right thing in spite of the fear. And that's, I think, really what we're doing here, is we are moving forward into a world we're not sure of. We are fearful, but we will do it anyway.
So we're going to touch on the topic of purpose of wealth on Thursday with Roger, but I think it's going to be in a different dimension. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of what you just discussed, taking it a step further and maybe taking this opportunity to discuss, the reason of being this custodian of the wealth or the intelligence or whatever the family has the privilege of being a custodian of? Would you like to share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because each family is going to have their own ideas about that. But certainly in family businesses that have gone over the generations, what they tell me is we are custodians of that wealth. We've seen it ebb and flow. We've seen wars. We've seen all sorts of things, and we have survived. And we try to be as fair as we could possibly be. We look at the world at large and see where we can help. Most of the families have philanthropic foundations and projects that they do to help. And I think that's going to be needed even more than ever. First of all, one of the things, and you alluded to earlier, we don't know what the business climate is going to be like when this is over. What's going to be left standing? This is an enormous concern for people. Everyone is trying to figure out what that's going to look like for their business, right? But we know historically that families survive, and they also have noblesse oblige, a noble obligation to help humanity. And the families do that and will continue to do that.
The two main reasons that families don't succeed to the next gen are mainly communication and trust. I think this is a real opportunity to build trust within the families to share openly like maybe they never have. Do you feel this is, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know you touched on communication, but to build trust in this time, in this space, which is one of the elements that are causing families not to be able to have longevity and succession.
Trust is extremely important. And I think you're right. During circumstances like this, we have an opportunity to cultivate trust through honest and open communication, not yelling, not that kind of communication, but the heartfelt communication that says, I'm afraid. What's going to happen? How can we foster and encourage trust in each other? Because at the end of the day, each family in their home and wherever the rest of that's the family. That's who you have. And to strengthen that with resilience and love and trust, I think these are the opportunities we have today, is to bring ourselves even more closely in alignment with one another. Let go of some of the petty problems. Bring together the trust. The knowledge that humanity has always survived in families and in the goodness of that family. And if we can't cultivate that during this time, we're wasting an opportunity. So instead of focusing on the fear, let's focus on the good. Let's focus on having conversations about what we're going to do and who we're going to be. I think that would be the most helpful.
I'm speaking to many leaders as this, the time evolves, and there's a clear tendency of moving towards a heart-centered leadership, like never before, right? Conversations and Zoom discussions are beginning with, how are you feeling? How is everyone doing? Something that most leaders never had to come up from that space of empathy, of love, of care. What are you hearing in terms of the leaders that you speak to and the families you speak to?
The same. I think it's interesting because we're all confronting the same elusive enemy, this virus that nobody can see, right? But that is affecting everything. So we can be united in that. And we can say, that's the reality. This thing is out there and it's very dangerous. But we as a family and as a society can actually stop and care for each other and ask, how are you doing? Are you safe today? How's your family? Because that's who we're talking to now. We're talking to families. We're talking to human beings. And it's interesting in terms of vanity and things like that. We've kind of been, if you notice, we've been stripped of all of that. We're all at home without the accoutrements that used to veil us from other people. We're just who we are now. Everybody's in the same boat. So it's a great equalizer. And I think actually that's one of the silver linings of this, is that you realize at the end of the day, we're just people. We're just families, all in it together.
All right, Kathleen, we've got a few more minutes before we close. Says here, I love the fact that we now ask, how are you? And we mean it. Before it was just often just a conversation opening up, but very few people actually meant it. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think also, Feisal, in reading your book, The 4 Steps of Flow, we can use them completely as a process to help us get through the fear, to become closer as a family, and just those four pillars of steps of flow. Do you want to just mention them so everybody can go away with them?
Sure. I mean, in terms of, again, we control two things in life: the meaning we give to everything that happens and our response, just as you were mentioning, right? The meaning that we give to COVID will then determine in which space and which part of the brain we respond in. And in this moment in time, we have a choice to either embrace what is or resist what is. And from that space, we will have, again, another element that Kathleen spoke to is trust. And from that space of trust, which is a knowing within, we will be able to have the opportunity to remain calm and centered in order to have clarity of mind to then live in a state of flow. And I think this is an opportunity to really practice that or build that resilience that we all talk about. I mean, it's been a word that's been spoken. That's what we do for a living, is help families build that. But now is the true test, that are we actually able to be in that state? Just the last question, I guess, before we go. He says, even though we may be in the same storm, but not in the same boat, are different contexts and different economic situations. Yes, I mean, obviously that's,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, I definitely, look, we're all in the same boat, meaning we're on an ocean we're all in the same ocean in our boats, our family boats. And yes, if we have something we can give to the others, that's what we are meant to be doing. And this creates the sharing, doesn't it? Because you can see everyone in their boats. We're all rowing across the ocean together, and maybe one has a supply that the other needs, or someone further along has something to give to the ones that are seemingly left behind, with the intention that we get there together. And this, I think you see this everywhere, that connectivity that realizes, we have to cross this ocean together. And we have to help those whose boats are maybe creaky and leaky. So that's, I think, a beautiful, beautiful thought. Thank you.
So in closing, Kathleen, you want to share maybe something from the book that helped you move through what you moved through in order for us to prepare for the unexpected, which is what the world will look like after this? What was something that you might want to share for those who would want to know more about what you shared in the book?
Well, I think when I wrote my book, A Grief Like No Other, I wrote this thing that really impressed me about the last of the human freedoms. Everything else can be taken away from you except how you respond to a challenge and how you step up. And I wrote that life is not fair. It doesn't ask you if you want to do something or if you'd like to do something. It only asks how you will step up and meet the challenge. And this is what we're being faced with today. So remember, the last of the human freedom that you have is how you will respond to this. And that is something to think about and find out in your heart. How do you want to respond to this crisis? What are the best parts of yourself that you can bring to this? And then do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, for the honor and privilege to be here together, to share and from a space of vulnerability, for sharing the experiences you've had and what you're now seeing happening all around the world. Thank you to everyone for really the generosity of your time, for showing up and being here, asking the questions from a complete, absolute vulnerability. And hope to see you tomorrow. We will be having a webinar on flattening the curve of chronic illness, and the day after, looking at the purpose of wealth, harmony and unity, and the value systems of families. So Kathleen, once again, thank you very much, truly in gratitude, and I wish you a wonderful day back in Los Angeles. Now it's only 8:30 in the morning. thank you for waking up so early for all of
Yeah.
us. We truly appreciate it. And some of us, it's about time we go to bed. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very
And
much.
thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate it. God bless. Bye-bye.